The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And welcome to The Divine Truth with myself, Taj, and my co-host, Sarah Adams. Hi, Sarah, are you there?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Okay, and we should have our guest on as well, Crow. Are you there?
I am.
How are you guys this evening?
I'm doing pretty well.
Really well.
How are you, Crow?
I'm good. We were expecting a bit of a blizzard because of the kind of news fear porn that announces these things, but it looks like we just got a little rain instead.
All right, how are you, Sarah? How's the weather down there in Dallas?
It's been hot. It's been like summer. We've been wearing summer dresses, me and my friends, and it's just been amazing.
That's nice to hear. It's freezing in England, so that's lovely to hear.
It's always freezing in England, even in summer. Let's not lie here about that. England doesn't really have a summer.
No, I know.
I love it though.
Well, we get about 2 weeks of summer if we're lucky.
Exactly. It's like 70. Gets what, up to 70 degrees if you're lucky over there.
If we're lucky, yeah, maybe. So I want to welcome our guest, Crrow777. I don't really know what to call you. Do I call you Crow? Or
yeah, my name is Crow. Yep.
Okay. I know you're probably best well known for filming the lunar wave. You want to probably be the first person to film the lunar wave. Is that right?
As far as I know, but there's a lot of video in this world that I haven't seen. As far as we know, the first time it was captured was right at the fall equinox of 2012.
Okay. We're not going to get too much into the lunar wave because you've talked about it a lot on your channel, and most people who are listening will probably be familiar with it. But the one thing I did want to ask you is, what do you think it actually is? I know. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there. We've got a bit of a lag. Go ahead.
Because I know you've worked out that it only happens at certain times of the year. Is it to do with the equinox? Is that right? Or
well, as time has gone on, that's not 100% right. We just had a capture this month, or was it January? Maybe it was January of 2017. It was the first capture I'm aware of in the winter, near the winter solstice. So the more people are filming, the more waves that are getting captured. I think probably the 2012 capture that I got first is still the best. I don't know how to answer. You know, you're asking me what it is. I think it's evidence, and it plays into an overall view of things maybe, but clearly we need more data. We always need more data.
Okay, because I've heard you talked about what space is and whether there's some kind of liquid in space. Do you want to talk a bit more about that? How would that work, and how? I mean, if there is a lunar wave, would that be some kind of ripple in that liquid that's being shown?
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, if it's correct that space is likely some sort of liquid, then we can begin to draw parallels to the lunar wave from, I don't know, a couple years ago anyhow, maybe longer. I'd always considered the lunar wave in a kind of liquidy way, but I needed more evidence. And as time went on, I've been a student of many religions in my lifetime. And I'm aware that the big religions, almost to each of them, talk about some sort of a firmament or a divider that separates water from water. And still, that wasn't enough for me to make the announcement. So I began to logically reason what would be enough for me to make a clip saying, I think it's likely that space may be water, with all the other things I just mentioned. Well, one of the things I did was defocus tests on planets and stars. And after I posted that footage, someone took an LED light, put it in a bowl of water, and disturbed the water and put up a defocused star right next to it to show the pattern is pretty much identical. But I reasoned out that if space was water, I should be able to find it encoded in language in some important event that has to do with space. So I went to the JFK speech, we're going to the moon, and right out of the gate, it is nothing but maritime language. We set sail on this sea and chart a new course on this ocean, this kind of language. And that's when I finally said that's enough for me. And
Right.
I made the clip.
That's very interesting.
So I know a bit about this. I do know in the Bible that it talks about, the ones that come from the abyss, or the angels in the abyss, and people think that that's the middle of, the earth, or a fiery ball in the earth. The abyss to me is space. And it's funny because there's the movie called The Abyss. Remember that famous movie called The Abyss, where they
Yeah.
go underwater and that's
Yeah.
where the ETs are? Yes. So the abyss, for me, when it says that they come from the abyss, it definitely meant space. Also, due to experience and what I know, space is liquid. So you're right on that. I'm a bit different. I am very, very spiritual and very, very much different. So I astral project, and I'm able to go to different planets and star systems and stuff. And when I travel, I try to explain to people we do it through liquid. Like it's easier when I'm around water to access portals and stuff and enter those things rather than when I'm away from water. Well, for me at least, how can I explain this? It's almost, that's what I call it. I call it liquid. When people talk to me about it, I explain that time doesn't exist in space, and actually liquid, it's some sort of liquid form. And when I'm out there, I literally feel like I'm in water.
Mm. So you can I think you've explained it before. Like you say, if you use water as a portal, you can transport to a body of water on Earth. You can transport yourself to a body of water on Saturn or somewhere else.
Yeah,
because
so water's used.
Water is a portal.
So it would make perfect sense that space is more liquid, because that's how things would definitely travel. That's how light and everything would travel.
Okay, that makes sense. Sort of, yeah, I understand that. Crow, have you heard of that? Crow, have you got anything to say about that?
I have no frame of reference to really address that at all. I don't astral project myself. I had looked into it. I've read about it, but I can't say anything intelligent, I guess.
That's where we're trying to join the spiritual part with those of you who have researched it on a quote more, scientific level, because we can give both aspects here so that people can understand how it works both on my side and your research. And I think that that's just absolutely amazing.
I agree. Anyone who's out there challenging the kind of indoctrination we've all had starting very early age in school is doing something helpful. Even if they end up being wrong, I still think it's helpful. So I agree.
I recently posted about an experience I had where it was like I was in space, but in an alternate dimension, and it was liquid, and there was no time that existed, and it was much harder for me to move, which was absolutely shocking experience I had while doing very deep meditation. And I had come to the conclusion a while back that space was liquid. So when Taj called me and he said that you stated that, I was like, that's absolutely amazing because of the experiences that I have about that.
Well, it's a thought that I'd had for a long time. And of course, from way before I was doing serious telescope work, I was aware that many major religions had talked about it in very similar ways, I might add. But maybe I can add a little more to this conversation. As we came out, I don't remember whether it was late fall or early winter. I had gone up through a bulkhead. On the East Coast, most houses have like this weird slanty door that comes from the basement, and it's called a bulkhead. But what it serves as is kind of a bunker. So when you're down in it, you're totally blacked out. And as I came out, I looked up at the sky, and for the first time in my life, I visually witnessed what's called the dome, the arch. You've heard it in like Omar Khayyam, all the old writings from Arabia and other places. And I saw it for the first time, and I was so stunned. I sat there and looked, saying, wait a minute, am I really seeing this? And when I'd confirmed myself that I was really seeing it, I began to break down, why am I seeing it now? What had happened here is we'd had very heavy winds, like 30, 40 mile an hour gusts for, I don't know, 2, 3, maybe 4 days. So there were no chemtrails obscuring anything. There was no moon on the night. And I happened to come out when the Milky Way was coming from the northeast sky down to the southwest sky. So you could see the Milky Way completely arc over your head. And these are the kinds of things that we can all witness. We just, so many of us live in cities, so many of us live in poor conditions for seeing the sky. And I started thinking to myself, I've been in Hawaii where the viewing is great. I've been in the desert where the viewing is great. And yet it took me well into my life to just be walking out of that bulkhead and realize all at once, wow, you can witness what has been referenced in all these ancient writings.
Wow. See, I like I said, I'm very spiritual, so I approach these things on a spiritual level, and I know in my research and what I know that the Earth is like like to me it's a reflection of a human cell on a cellular level. And what are cells in? They're in liquid. That's the thing. They're I have this whole thing where I think that the whole universe here is almost as within so without, that aligned. They're saying that brain cells now look like certain parts of space, so it's very certain things in space. So it's very, very interesting how they're aligning that all up. Like everything is reflected within and without. So it would be quite interesting that, we are like the Earth is sort of a cell within the liquid, it's a reflection of the human body. Everything's a reflection. So that's something that I also approached a while too, on that level of research of how they're finding out that, even certain things in space look like certain things in the human body or certain plants on Earth. It's all quite so interesting.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that. When I was in my early 20s, it was even before I'd gone into the Marine Corps, so I might have been in my teens. I was on a trip up to Yosemite, and we'd hiked up this very, very tall mountain. I don't remember whether it was 11 or 12,000 feet, but once you got up on top, it was almost sheer on the opposing side that we didn't come up, and you were looking down over this valley. And as you did it, it looked almost identical to a vein system in a human body, all the little rivers and lakes. And as you began to examine it, it was almost such a spot on match that it kind of takes your breath away, even the colors at that altitude. So, it is an interesting idea. And I think to some degree, this is what ideas like the Fibonacci sequence are about, where you begin to realize that, hey, man, the certain number patterns, this is how a leaf is made, or a human hand. So clearly there's a relationship between all living things in this way.
And that's absolutely divine to me. When I did have that experience, it was a bit thicker than water. I must say that I felt like it was a bit thicker than water, but whatever it was, there was no time. Time did not exist, and I didn't even realize when I came back. I had really hard time. Just I was back here from that experience. It's like I was transported into that experience. When I got back here, it's still as if time was still slow and kind of adjusted to back here, which was so interesting. And I think I'll never forget that experience because of that. I wanted to ask you, well, Taj is asking questions. I want about the moon, because this is something that is very important to me.
What did you want to ask about the moon, Sarah?
Well, let's go ahead and jump into that subject, because that one is one of the ones that I really am looking forward to. And I have experiences on the dark side of the moon, and I wanted to see what you feel about the moon and what your research on the moon is, your theories about it, or your research is about.
Currently, with the information that I have and the 4 years that I spent nearly nonstop filming the moon in high definition, I say this. I think it's likely that the moon is not a rock in space. I think it's quite a bit closer than we've been told. It's not a quarter of a million or whatever they say, 240,000 miles away. And I think it's quite possible that it's emanating, it's its own light source. In other words, it's not reflecting sunlight. I've gone at this many ways. Unfortunately, early on, I used the word hologram. That was a big mistake because people got hung up on what holographic technology might be. Then I switched over to using the word facade. And that didn't work so well because then the implication became, well, there's something behind a facade. But I will further say, taking apart language and looking at almost any form of media, particularly major motion pictures or television, you will find 90 some percent of the time that every time you are shown an image of the moon, it is associated with death, insanity, or sleep. And quite often it's death. In a lot of the movies from the 50s, you'll see things like a person die, a flash to the moon, and then a baby being born. In conjunction with other
I
research
can
that I've
explain
done,
that.
yeah, in conjunction with other research that I've done, I think it's quite feasible to consider an avenue of study geared toward determining whether or not the moon is actually some kind of a control system that relates directly to our living and dying.
Oh, see, this is why I wanted to jump into this topic. Okay, so when I was 19 years old, I went ahead and got out of my body and decided I was going to go to Saturn. So this is just because I'm going to explain this briefly. Um, a long time ago, I know some things about Saturn, so I to retrieve something on Saturn, basically a technology at the top of Saturn, which is it's sort of helps project realities. So it was lost a long time ago, very, very long time ago. So it was my goal to go get there. What I knew I needed to do was to use the moon basically to project me out, because it does take a lot of energy to travel through space. So I had this experience. I don't know if you've seen the Pink Floyd album where there's the pyramid and the prism.
Of course.
Uh, yes, Dark Side of the Moon. Oddly enough, my mom had explained to me when she was young that she had met the Pink Floyd band, and it's very interesting that they did this whole album, and the connection that she had to them, that she met them a long time ago, I think what she said when she was in France. Uh, I went ahead and got out of my body and basically tuned myself out that I would go to Saturn because I know how to do this. And I got to the moon. Now, you're right about the moon. It's definitely not what people think. It is part of the control system, because what it does is it catches people's souls. And on the dark side of the moon, or the side you can't see, there are literally thousands of small pyramids. I'd say they're probably no more than 3-4 feet tall, if that. There's all these small pyramids, and what it does is anything that's trying to get past, it literally absorbs it. So if a soul is trying to, okay, when people die or anything like that, they go towards different star systems. The moon, however, it absorbs anybody trying to pass their soul and reerases that energetically in them, and then puts them back into a body. So it will put them back into a newborn body, and it continuously is recycling them like this. These small pyramids attempted to, they track any light that's going out of this system. The soul is made of light. It attempted to do it to me, but because of the being I am, I did get past it. And I started being absorbed into this small pyramid. When I travel, my color is almost rainbow-like color. It started to pull me into this small pyramid. It's tried to start to erase me to send me back, but it couldn't do it because it wasn't powerful enough, and I got out of there. But there is a whole entrapment system on the dark side of the moon, and that's why my interest in the Pink Floyd album and the dark side of the moon and what they knew, because the pyramid on there, it traps light, and literally the soul's made of light, and then it sends them back to be reincarnated here, or it sends people back here, sends their souls back here. So I found it very interesting that Pink Floyd must have known something about that to do that album, because it's the experience that I had is literally on the front of their album.
Well, I guess I'm not sure how to respond to that. I can offer, the research I've done, but to address at least the musical portion of the end of what you said there, it's pretty clear what music and record companies have been for, in terms of social engineering and programming and the encoding of information, at least since probably the late 50s or 60s. I don't know how far it goes back, probably much further, since RCA and companies like that were weaponized going into World War II. And that's also when they changed the orchestral tuning to 440, which was a weaponization of the tuning of all instruments. These things are all encoded. I mean, even what you're talking about, even though I have no frame of reference to add or subtract from what you've said, it's been encoded endlessly. There's a show on TV in the United States called Futurama that encoded the whole Matrix idea almost verbatim in the way that you talked about it, and then tied it to the movie 2001, where basically it's called the near Death Star, and they're storing people and using them as batteries there.
Yes, that's what I picked up, that they would, okay, so it wasn't allowing souls to get out of the system. And like I said, I'm very spiritual, and souls are supposed to move on to other experiences in the universe, but it was constantly keeping them here as batteries and putting them back into bodies so that they could be farmed. And this is something that and I don't want to be too shocking because I don't know, I know a bit about you and the work you're into, but this is something that I have experienced myself. I do believe that the moon is a ship. It is a ship, and it is the reason I do believe this is because of what I experienced. I know Saturn's a ship too, but the moon is a ship, and I do believe that it's literally helping to keep people or the souls trapped in here so that they can be farmed for soul energy. And a lot of my work is about how they're using people as batteries for soul energy.
Well, I'll tell you what. Again, I have no frame of reference for any of that, but nothing would surprise me today. It is very clear that we live in a broken, corrupted system, that we're likely in an endless loop. I think 9/11 demonstrates this in certain ways. Something's gone wrong here, and it's not an easy thing to unravel. It's, so many people come to my podcast and they'll ask me questions like, who's doing this? Who's corrupting our system? And while we love to point at royalty all day long and places like the Vatican or the British royal family, and people love to shout words like Illuminati or Mason, at the end of the day, a lot of these descriptions don't have a lot of meaning, but nonetheless, we understand what the system is. It's currently broken and corrupted. So, while you take a spiritual view, and that's wholly different from the view that I take mostly when I'm doing this, I think one of the key things to begin to examine is, how did we get here? And as we go back through history, we start to find that there is no portion of history that we cannot logically take apart and begin to find serious problems with it. As a matter of fact, there are Russian researchers who have apparently published way before I came to my conclusions that the timeline has been falsified. And they have made claims like there is no real history past a couple hundred years. And even in the history we've been handed, you're looking at people basically changing their costume and their name and playing another role, but it's basically the same idea or same character. And I know that was kind of long-winded, and I didn't mean to pull off topic too much there.
That's okay.
No,
I wanted to.
it's okay. I want to add in one last thing. Interestingly enough, I did pick up that the moon reprograms people during their sleep. And people don't remember, whatever signals come in from the moon is program and reprogram people in their sleep. So they forget a lot of things and they don't remember. And that's perfect for literally reprogramming or redoing different timelines, that alone.
Yeah.
It had been suggested at one point that when I'd filmed the lunar wave, I'd been contacted by so many people, but that it was some kind of a download. And I thought it was an interesting idea, and I had intended to go back and look at it more carefully. Not very many people are aware that the highest Jewish holiday was the night of the lunar wave. And darn it, I can't. Is it Yom Kippur? I don't remember. I may not have that right. It's the highest Jewish holiday. And part of the idea of that holiday, and by the way, they're using a lunar calendar to set that holiday, of course, is you're asking for redemption from God. And the idea is the finger of God coming down to change man in some way, or I guess you could even think of it as an update. So that's an interesting idea, but for me to really address it very much, I would need to spend a period of time really kind of going at it and taking apart all the things that I've forgotten that I knew back in 2012.
Okay, I wanted to move on to the next question. I wanted to ask you, like, how does NASA fit into all of this? I mean, why are they making us think that the space is a vacuum and these planets are not what we think they are? Why don't they just tell us that space is water and there's a firmament? I mean, why the big lie, basically?
Well, they were formed, in my view, they were formed to ensure that not very many people on the face of this world understand what's above the blue sky they see. And if you begin to logically take that apart, what you're being denied is understanding where you exist. And when you have been denied understanding of where you exist, in some ways, that denies you the ability to understand where you can go from here. Not only that, well, I mean, anyone can logically deduce what that means, to be denied a good understanding of where it is you are. And in my view, that's exactly what NASA and every other single space agency in this world is doing. And now we must also include the private corporations that are moving in so quickly to replace the governmental quasi-military NASAs of this world, places like SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, which are equally fraudulent and equally complicit in the lie, in my view.
Okay.
It's very interesting that NASA has NSA in it. Isn't that quite interesting? I'm very interested in words and how they're coded, and I always found that quite interesting.
I've seen so many people take apart, NASA's logo and the vector symbols that reside in so many of the world space agencies, turning it into Satan or any number of things, and it's pretty clear.
It's pretty demonic, yes.
Well, at these high levels and at these high corporate levels from these private companies coming in to play the space fraud game, these logos are not made lightly. The meaning that's put into them is carefully planned out. It is part of the overarching system of deception within which we all reside, or most of us reside. Well, I guess we all reside here, to be fair. It's just that some of us understand a little bit more about the system, and the majority of us have come up through school and been taught how to get along within the system. But unfortunately, we've been denied knowing anything about the system. And of course, there are those elite families that went to Harvard or Hogwarts or wherever they went who actually did get some information about the system itself.
It's
Go ahead, Sarah. Are you going to say something?
To me, this is all quite interesting because, if we look at it the way that they are farming people for energy or whatever, that, it'd be quite interesting that they don't want anybody to know what's out there. They just want to keep everybody basically, in the dark on many things, whether it's food, whether it's what's in space or what's happening. And that's the perfect way to keep people as farm animals in a way.
Well, there's allegories that we can look at that are basically one-to-one allegories. A lot of the classical art, classical literature, I've already talked a little bit about the classical music or the music industry that made the soundtracks of our lives. They're all complicit in the encoding of information. But if we look at things like the book Animal Farm, the book Animal Farm was written by a man who was on the outskirts of the Tavistock Institute. And these people are cited as being some of the major social engineers of our lives. And if you look at Animal Farm with a new context, with a fresh eye, and understand that when you were in high school and you were given that book to read, you were not given the correct context to understand what you were being told in that book. That book is demonstrating the methods that are used on a world population for social engineering and control. If you look at a book like Brave New World, same thing. From the outskirts of the Tavistock Institute, the author came and influenced by this, new happening at the time when that was written, or relatively new happening. And Brave New World is basically a blueprint for where we are going. And then you can look at books like 1984, and again, the same is true of that author. And the book 1984 is basically it's a very cold version of what might be, I guess, is a good way to say it. But we have these one-to-one allegories that were written by people that we can fingerprint right back to sources of our troubles, organizations who create the problems. And it's maybe it's a bit like the third law of alchemy, where you're required to temporarily show what was previously hidden. Maybe it has something to do with the Talmudic law in the similar way, or what most people would consider karma or cause and effect, where if you simply trap someone and you hide the trap so well that they had no way to know it was there, then there's a karma problem or a cause and effect problem or some kind of a backlash by the person who set that trap. We see it over and over and over in modern media, movies like The Matrix, how many movies pre-echoed 9/11? The Back to the Future series was wholly about pre-echoing 9/11 all those years prior. So what we see here is demonstrative proof that people knew before the fact. They tipped their hand temporarily, no matter how kind of arcane a way they did it, so that the majority of us didn't catch on till much later. Point is it's being done.
Okay, the next question I wanted to ask you was, so if space is water or liquid, so what are UFOs then? If they're not objects traveling through space, what exactly are they? Do you have a theory on that, Crow?
In my view, nothing goes above what we call low Earth orbit, which is actually our atmosphere. I have a lot of strange objects that I filmed over the 4 years of pretty much nonstop filming, and I have come to the conclusion with the information I currently have that everything I have filmed is likely human technology. I can't tell you if there's others. I grew up thinking it's hard to believe that humans are the only game in town. The problem is we need some kind of a basis to make a claim beyond that. And one of the real problems is when I was researching Tavistock, they flat out claim in more than one way and more than one document that anyone can look up that they began the alien agenda idea and the whole Roswell on the 33rd parallel and that whole game that everyone's aware of, and claiming responsibility for the nonsense UFO stuff that goes out on television everywhere. So when you have kind of fingerprints like this from a place like Tavistock, then you have someone like me who put in 4 years of firsthand experience to film all these things. I've never filmed anything that is so amazing that I can't attribute it as human technology. And I have filmed some amazing things. I filmed an orb going into a chemtrail. It looks like a ball of plasma or a ball of light kind of firing some bizarre beam into the chemtrail. That's posted on my channel. My wife filmed a vortex when we were filming the moon that could only be seen in full spectrum film. At the time, I had 2 cameras on it, a visual spectrum camera and a full spectrum. The visual spectrum saw nothing, and this little vortex was picked up by the full spectrum camera. But to kind of shorten down where I'm going here, I've filmed an awful lot of things that we have not been told about, and for the life of me, I can only attribute them as likely human tech.
Right.
I have a question here.
Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
Tosh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I was wondering if, maybe they just use the whole alien thing to rename more ancient things like what you would call gods or angels or demons. What about that? What's your theory on that?
Well, this is complete speculation. And the problem with speculating in this way is all of our minds have been so polluted by the social engineering that's come out of media, movies, books, sci-fi, all these people that hung around, so much of the sci-fi invented the technologies we supposedly have. I'll tell anyone that wants to listen why we don't have satellites, and yet a sci-fi writer invented satellites and telecommunications, by the way. So many examples of this.
What if the moon's like an old also sort of satellite system to not only a UFO but a satellite system in a way? So it is shaped like a satellite. Think about it.
Yeah. So here's the problem for me. This is the problem for me. So many people have tried to kind of pull me into the flat Earth movement. And while I think it's a great thing that all those people are challenging the construct of the NASA orbital model, which I do not accept, I'm not interested in joining that group, and here's why. Say we find out that I did see the arch of the sky and that there is a hard, fast barrier as I have been stipulating. Say the moon is all the things I have claimed. Well, now we have a much bigger kettle of fish to fry, because now there's no way you're going to come up with a natural process to have created all this, in my view. Which means, how did it get here? Which means, who put it here? which means how in the heck did we end up where we are? And so these are the real problems with going down the road that we're kind of on, in my view.
Yeah.
I wanted to answer the one question about what UFOs are. In my view, they are they're made of light, and then whenever they come into more denser regions like Earth, they switch quickly into matter. And scientists have just proved that light makes matter. So that's to Taj's question. This is what I'm referencing from a while ago.
Yeah, I think I've heard someone say that before, that the craft, or UFOs you want to call them, once they enter the dense dimension that is the Earth, 3D, that
They get
they're,
pulled
they're
more
not
into matter.
they're not used to the gravity of the Earth and such, and that's why maybe a lot of UFOs crash, or they I don't know how to put it, but they lose
It
control.
literally burn to go down in more denser matter. It literally will burn them. So that's why some of the bodies might be disfigured and different than they would normally look when they're in higher frequencies. But that's my own thing. I know we do different work, so I do respect your work as much as I do believe bringing the different views. That's what this show's about, bringing the different views, and that's, like I said, it's amazing we can join on that.
Right. My only problem here is that when we start to go down this road, we have to have a basis. Without a basis for something, we're really speculating, and speculation doesn't add much. And so I would point out, one of the laws that I made for myself was we live in the high def age. Anything amazing that can be filmed will be filmed, and it'll be filmed in high def. And we're living in a world where nearly every human being in the bigger countries, larger countries, carrying a high def phone in their pocket. And so when we begin to look at the basis for, is something coming in to our atmosphere, it kind of goes against where I have reasoned out I think we are with the information I have, and that is that there is a hard, fast barrier that no one in this world, not NASA, not anyone, not a rocket, not a machine, can seem to get through. If that is correct, then we could start to logically deduce, well, what the heck are all these meteorites? And I've said many, many times, in all the 4 years straight that I was filming, and I used telescopes since the mid 90s. It just, until 2012, I wasn't filming nonstop. I must have seen hundreds of fireballs. On some nights, I would see many. On a single night, things we're told are meteorites. And I began to realize that those are not meteorites. They can't be. And it's an observational thing. And when I began to get to the point where I realized there was likely a hard, fast barrier, I had to come to the conclusion, if they were rocks in space, how are they getting in here? And that sets aside the whole idea of burning into the atmosphere. All that stuff would be filmed by now, and in my view.
What you just said reminds me of some verse in the Bible where it says that, the fallen angels were thrown to earth, and it was like they were like sort of fireballs. If I remember reading that right, it referenced them not in that specific word, not with that specific word, but with something similar to that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work with Christian material as it relates to Freemasonry, and what the Freemasons did with that material and all the material that came out of the Vatican. It's been said that of the major religions, there are many levels of understanding the scriptures from the major religions of this world. And in some cases, it is claimed that surface readings of those, the initial just kind of read it for what it says on the surface, is not actually helping you that much, and is actually a bit of a stumbling block to get you to go deeper.
Yes, it's coded. It's there to trap those who don't really want to see, but those who truly want to see will find a way through it. It's coded. It's almost like a labyrinth, to me at least.
I would suggest that the things that came to us through the Vatican were heavily, heavily encoded by the Masonic tradition. And I've done shows to demonstrate what, in the late 1800s, a king, a rich guy, and a duke were given as the highest texts of Freemasons. And a guy who'd been trained by the Vatican up to, I think, the PhD level in divinity happened to get the other copy. And he put a lot of things together and he began to demonstrate what the Freemasons were doing, like the NRI on top of the cross. They were breaking that down to 4 archangel names, and they were encoding it with earth, wind, fire, the 4 elements. And they were using that as passwords to get into lodges, of all things. And yet the only people who were aware of this information in England at that time, apparently, were the 3 top guys. So you begin to get an image of just how encoded our world is. And so many people get upset when you begin to address any religion directly. And just to be clear, I'm not taking a run at anyone's religion. I don't do that. People have freedom to worship whatever they do, but you've got to understand what the Vatican is, why it was there, what it's related to, and how Freemasonry is inseparable from the royalty and controlling factors of the Western world.
It's interesting you were just it was interesting you were just talking about meteorites, because I know you said that you've never actually seen an object hit the moon. And I've noticed that all of the craters on the moon all look perfect, like a meteorite hit them at a 90-degree angle, which doesn't make any sense. But you've never actually seen any object hit the moon, and all the time you've been looking at it. Is that right?
Right. It's actually worse than that. Here's one thing that happened.
What's weird is, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. Did I step on you, Sarah?
I was just thinking about how they just found out the moonstone we gave another country or something is fake, and why would we give a fake moonstone to another country?
Yeah,
did you read that article?
Yeah, they don't exist. I covered that recently. It was I think it was Amsterdam. They had it insured for something like $500,000. They came to find out it was they claimed it was petrified wood or something like that, but that's not even half the story. They counted up, someone did the footwork to go figure out how many moon rocks got hounded out, and they came to realize they couldn't track down more than something like 10 or 11 of them, and those 10 or 11 they don't have access to. But to back up a little bit on what Taj was saying, it had dawned on me that in all the thousands of hours of filming the moon, I had seen so many fireballs come into our atmosphere that we were told were meteorites, and yet nothing in all that time had hit the moon, moved, or changed other than the lunar wave. So I began to think about that. And I made clips that said, this is further evidence that the moon is not what you think. In my view, I don't think a person even could set a boot on the moon if they wanted to. But after I had made the clip saying, look, we should have, I went and looked up what the last recorded new crater was and found a bunch of nonsense in that. Well, it was a short time later, someone sends me a clip from NASA claiming that NASA filmed a 4K meteor strike on the moon. So I open up this video. It's grainy black and white, so they can call 4K whatever they want, but 4K means something to me. And for about 3 or 4 frames, you see this little white light go off, and they say, yep, there it is. We filmed a meteor hitting the moon. I didn't need any further proof than that, because I immediately made a clip asking, at what point does NASA's video, the quality of NASA's video, even need to approach when I'm shooting in my backyard with no budget? Because mine was like maybe 200 or 300 times better video than what they claimed they had with 4K.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, some of the images, even from Pluto and other missions they've sent out, are it's ridiculous.
It's all constructs.
Yeah, they send out like 2 megapixel cameras on a 10-year-old satellite.
Well, I'll be so bold as to tell everyone listening, you have never seen an image of anything from space ever in your life. Mm-hmm. So many people like to point to the blue marble, and that's kind of a very interesting thing for anyone who wants to look into the blue marble image. We were told it was shot from Apollo 17, that it was a snapshot. In fact, it's not. It's a construct. Not only is it a construct, in the modern age, this image was put in every textbook in this world and played off as if it was literally a snapshot of Earth from space. In fact, what it is an artist's rendering. And people have videos up where they've now taken Photoshop and realized that they cloned identical clouds all over the image, among other things. There's all these things that just prove it's not a snapshot of anything. I had taken this idea further. when I took apart the false Rosetta, the Philae Rosetta mission, where they claimed they landed on a comet moving 84,000 miles an hour, whatever it was, so far away that the
Oh
radio.
yeah, where that Rosetta satellite or something. That Rosetta, what was it? It died
It's
or
an
something and
asteroid.
landed there, and it was,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it died.
Yeah,
They messed up the landing. Yeah,
yeah,
apparently.
we never got any images, of course, but that's not even the half of it. It was all stuff named after an island in Egypt that has the Isis temple and these other things. It was encoding all this stuff. But when I sat down to do the
I'd like to see
research,
that.
I looked at my wife as I began to do the research to do the clip for the phony comet landing, the Rosetta mission, Philae Rosetta. And I said to my wife, what do you think the odds are that they couldn't resist making one of the angle views of the comet itself the shape of the Philae Island that it's named after? And sure as I'm wearing sneakers right now, there is a view that I have posted in the video on my channel showing the comet matching almost verbatim the island. And not only that, if you went and lined up the landing sites, you could see where the Isis temple. I mean, it's all a construct. It's all a poke in your eye, and it is all making fun of the stupidity with which we accept information.
I know. I saw an artist rendering from 1979, I think it was, of Pluto, and then they showed it when whatever satellite arrived there, like last year, and the pictures matched perfectly.
Right.
The
What
pictures
was
that were
that guy?
taken.
That guy's name was Don Dixon or something like that. And that's
Yeah.
a funny thing because I made clips on that when it happened. And actually, that's one of the funny things, on my up to that point when I did the fake Pluto nonsense and made a clip basically telling everyone if you want to see Pluto, you got to go to Disneyland. And by the way, it was invented by the same year by the same Freemasons, 33rd degree Freemasons. But anyhow, I put that clip up as an afterthought and I included the Don Dixon painting and I said, what are the odds? I mean, it looked so close to what we were shown in the end. I mean, when Don Dixon painted that, it could look any infinite number of ways. At the time, all we could see was a white light. And I know because I pointed my scope at it. It is the dimmest little kind of almost non-existent star you will ever see when you point a scope at it. So much so you're not even sure you're looking at the right thing at first. But Don Dixon paints this picture, and it's so close to what NASA ends up presenting us that Don Dixon actually had to make a statement about that later. And the funny thing is that clip got picked up that I did by Gizmodo, and it was bad-mouthed endlessly. The Daily Mail in the UK, and then an onslaught of people came from the gaming community to troll my video and thumbs down it. To date, it is the only video that I have where thumbs down occasionally exceed the thumbs up. I mean, to that point, they weren't even in the same ballpark. Thumbs up would always be many hundreds of times more. But I think when I got to about 12 or 1,300 thumbs, thumbs down and thumbs up remained within 10 of each other for the life of that clip.
I think the trolls seem to come out when you get quite close to the truth. That always seems to be the case.
Seemingly, and they seem to come out of the gaming community quite frequently.
Yeah, I think Sarah has a lot of
I'm
experience with trolls as well, I think.
I did for a while, and now I've got way more support, so they've died out, which is absolutely amazing. But I have a question here. So we all know about where it says there was a great war in the Bible, and if you look at the planets and you look at the moon, there's all these like meteorites hit them. But what if it came from a great cosmic war that happened? And I know that the Bible and many religions talk about that, and it does look like these planets were absolutely devastated, and they're saying that Mars may have had nuclear wars and stuff like that. There's evidence of it. What do you think about that?
I think that what we see of the moon is a construct. Even if you go to look at the angle and depth and uniformity of all the craters that you can see, it doesn't wash. It doesn't wash. I mean, the moon looks
I
like
agree
it's
with
been
that.
in a shooting gallery. Not only does it look like it's been in a shooting
does.
gallery, it's never been hit in recent times. And so that would beg the question, well, where's all the strikes here? And of course, we have the crater that I've been to in Arizona there. I don't accept that that's a crater from anything coming from space at all. And I think what we see of the
That's
moon
where
is what's intended for us to see, and I don't think it has
I agree with
anything. Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with anything striking anything. And again, I would state for the record, with the information I have to the current date, I don't think it's even possible that if someone could get there, that they could walk on it.
How interesting.
So I also want to talk about things like the Hubble. I know you did a video with, I can't remember the guy's name, about the Hubble Space Telescope, how that's fake. And most likely the ISS is fake and satellites as well. So all of these rockets that they're sending or supposedly sending into space, I know you've done videos saying that they actually arc off and probably land in the ocean. But
Right.
what is the purpose of doing all that? Why does NASA have to keep up that sort of the image that they're actually sending stuff up into space?
This world is governed through false events and lies and manipulation, and it always has been as far back as I can see. And so what you're looking at is a fraudulent space agency maintaining the lie. That's what you're watching. Anyone who wants to go out and look at the just plethora of rocket launch video you can get your hands on will notice very quickly a few things. One of those things is that they arc very hard, and if you watch them, many of them go past apex and are coming back down. A huge number of them are edited before you can detect that. But and before I go on, there's even a bunch of still shots where someone opened the shutter to a camera to catch the trajectory, and you can see the trajectory go all the way to apex, over, coming back down, and then you'll see the caption saying, oh, here's a rocket taking a satellite to space, when you can see that it's clearly coming back down. But rockets are a funny thing. A friend of mine that does a lot of my shows on Crrow777 radio with me, named Jason, we were doing a show when we realized, because I knew it was something like 17,500 miles escape velocity, or whatever we're told a rocket has to do to escape Earth's gravity. And I began to realize, because I was a Marine, wait a minute, how fast is a bullet? And we looked up how fast a bullet is. Turns out, according to the internet, that a rocket goes many times faster than a bullet. So not only are these rockets ending up, in the ocean, do you accept that a human being could sit on a projectile going many times faster than a bullet and then be in an arcing motion? When I was in the Marine Corps, I knew a couple fighter pilots. I knew a guy who was like in the very fast kind of F-14-y looking jets, and a guy who did Harriers. And they talked to me about what kind of training and equipment they have to keep from passing out due to G-force. One of the things is they would have these suits. This is way back in the 80s, by the way. They had these suits that squeezed their legs to keep the blood from, I guess, leaving their head and going into their lower extremities. But what's more, they had this training they had to go through where they physically learned how to breathe and flex muscles to keep themselves from passing out when they're simply banking in a jet. Now let's talk about getting on something going many times faster than a bullet that's arcing, and you begin to put together the logical nonsense.
Okay, we're just going to go to a commercial break. So are you going to stay on, Sarah?
I will to say hello to Nyssa and say goodbye. Thank you.
Okay, if you guys mute your microphones, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to The Divine Truth on Revolution Radio with your hosts Taj and Sarah Adams. Before we continue the show, I just need to say that Revolution Radio is a listener-supported network. We do rely on your donations to keep us on air. None of the hosts get paid for what they do. You can go to our donation page on freedomslips.com and you can buy one of our seed packs starting at $60. If you want to make a donation, you can also join our monthly support our monthly support club, which starts at $10 a month, and you can also make a single donation also on that page. So now we'll continue with the show. Is Nyssa there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, Taj. Hi, Crrow.
Sarah, you still there?
Yes, hello. Hi, Nyssa.
And
My
Crrow,
darling.
and Crrow, you still there?
I am.
Okay, I think Sarah's just going to go now. She's only going to do the first half of the show, so we'll say goodbye to Sarah.
I'm sorry, guys. I had to help my aunt, and I'm at Whole Foods in the parking lot doing this in the car. So,
Oh, bless you.
Thank you very much, Crrow, for, speaking with me. And I think you're brilliant. And it was lovely to chat with you. And I'm definitely going to be watching some of your videos.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah.
You guys have a good rest of the show. I'm off.
Thank you, Sarah. Have a great day.
Okay, I'll talk to you later, Sarah, okay? Bye.
Hi, Crrow.
Hi, this is Nyssa.
Yes, Nyssa.
Yes, this is me. Yeah,
Nyssa
I'm
is
so glad.
my other co-host.
Sorry. Yeah,
Hello.
it's between two women.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. I'm so glad we've got you on, actually, because I actually thought about you the other day because something really strange happened to me, which no one else seemed to actually notice. But I could actually get the sun and the moon in the same screenshot of my mobile phone. And I know by the normal standard, the normal model, and I'm so relieved that in the first half, I heard you say you're not of the Flat Earth Club, which I have my own opinions on that, but I'm not in the club. I think it's a matter of consciousness and perspective. I think we are on a plane of consciousness, which gives us the illusion and perspective of being on a flat Earth because it's a plane of consciousness. But in this universe, in like the divine architecture, energy tends to take a spherical form. So I do think it's obviously a globe. I just wanted your opinion, really, because that isn't supposed to happen.
Well, a lot of people send me images of this. And for the most part, I don't comment too much on it. I mean, I think people seeing that and then questioning it, that's really the goal. And to be clear, I don't accept the NASA orbital model of everything spinning around everything. I just don't. And I have my reasons for that, but I'm not really ready to dive into that too much. But I think you said it well. And when I've been pressed by many people asking me, well, what is this place? I too say a plane of existence. I think that's the best description I can give at this point. Problem is we need a heck of a lot more information that didn't come from official sources.
Yeah, isn't it funny that it's called a planet? It's like plane with a T on the end.
Right. Well, even if you dig into the supposed Greek definitions of that word, you're left a little flat. I mean, wandering star and all this other nonsense. It just doesn't fit with what we're looking at. And for my money, so many people say, well, what are the planets? And right now they're lights. That's what we can know about them, unless you choose to accept information from liars. If you want to accept information from liars, then I guess what we're looking at could be any number of descriptions they've handed us. But around about the time you prove the moon landing was a lie, I think you come to the realization that all the information that we've been given from space agencies and officialdom are nonsense.
Yeah, this is very interesting because it aligns with the information that I get from my friends who are Vedic astrologers, who basically see space as basically the planets are luminary bodies and space is
Right.
plasma. So it's kind of like a watery kind of plasma energy, and you can only actually go into space if you're in an energy form, which supports the theory of obviously UFOs being light orbs, and then when they come into this environment they have to be solid and three-dimensional and they crash and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's very
Right.
interesting.
I think we differ a little on UFOs, but I can state categorically that many of the conclusions I finally arrived at over time with the current information I have are very close to much of the Vedic material. Actually, a lot of it.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of people think because we see the planets as spherical objects that we must be on a spherical object, which is not necessarily the case. But I don't know. What do you think, Crow? What do you think the planets actually are?
They're lights. That's what I can tell you. The problem here, I did a thought experiment on the moon. NASA tells us that there's a naked eye object called Aristarchus. It's a white crater that when the moon is near full, people with good eyes can see. Um, we're also told that it's 240,000 miles away from us, and we're also told that the crater is about 40 miles in diameter. So what I did is I put a 40-mile crater on Earth in Google Earth, and I went up the 40,000 miles that they allow, and you couldn't detect it anymore. And while I know this is only software, my point is I think the moon is either 5 or 6 times further, and yet even at 40,000 miles, you couldn't detect the crater I had put there. When you begin to reason out what is logically acceptable, you begin to find that school has trained you into believing in many things that you probably should not. As an example, I can sit in my backyard and shoot the moons of Jupiter. And we're told, I'm going to pull a number off the top of my head here. I don't know how close I am these days because I haven't looked at it in a while. Something like 400, 500 million miles to Jupiter. And here with a little 8-inch telescope in my backyard, I'm filming these relatively tiny moons of Jupiter. And when you compare them to the shots of supposed spacecraft traveling towards these objects, my images are often better. And when you begin to parallel all these things, you come to the conclusion that you've been convinced that you should buy into things that common sense would not allow you to buy into.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think most people rely on what they've learned from school, what they learned from. They obviously think NASA knows better, scientists know better, people, all these people know better, but they don't draw any logic to the conclusions that they're being told. They don't think. People have forgotten to think for themselves.
Well, we've been trained in this way. We've been trained that the man in the white lab coat is clearly the guy. I mean, even our television in the United States, Gilligan's Island off the top of my head, it's programming you. It's teaching you that the rich dude is ultimately in charge because he's rich and he doesn't have to do anything. If there's a decision to be made on the island, well, of course that goes to the skipper because he's the skipper. Now, if something sciencey comes up, well, the professor's right there to take care of it, and the women, of course, are there to do the laundry and make the food. This is the social programming of the late 60s that was coming out of television that so many of us grew up with, and it really does have an effect on big populations.
Yeah.
Isn't it true also that the orbit of the moon is illogical? I think it was in the book Who Built the Moon. It was basically explained that there was more reasons for there not to be a moon than there was for there to be a moon.
Right, and you can go down this road all day long. Very few people understand that there actually is no explanation for how we got our moon. They're usually of the mind that it's been proven that something hit our planet and the moon was formed out of that. Well, that's not true. It's not proven at all. It's just one of the many theories. And to put a fine point on it, the last theory that I'm aware of that tried to describe how the moon got here was created in either 2010 or 2012. That's how recently they're still going at this nonsense. And I would point out, if you ask NASA about Europa, they'll tell you everything you ever wanted to know about the supposed moon of Jupiter, 500 million miles away, whatever it is. And yet our own moon that we can see every single day, all day long, all night long, we don't know anything about it. It bears some credulity.
Yeah, NASA keeps changing their story as to the origin of the moon all the time, I think. And I think the last theory was about 2012, yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Weren't there legends of there being the time before the moon? I think it was David Icke that dug up all of the. He went and interviewed original Aboriginals and all different theories, didn't he? And he found that in all these different cultures, they had a record of a time before the moon. I don't know how realistic that is.
Well, I actually did work on that myself. I don't really follow
Okay.
I don't really follow anyone. I try to just kind of keep to myself. Sometimes I just feel like there's so much information coming that you can't separate the pollution from the valuable stuff anymore. So I pretty much keep to myself. At one point, I had gone at this idea of a time before the moon, and you will find that there are absolutely cultures. It's even written into myth. There are even names of supposed peoples from the ancient Greek time, and their very name means before there was a moon.
Wow, that's really interesting.
I wanted to ask you, oh, go ahead, Nyssa, do you have another question?
Oh, sorry, no, I was just going to ask about, you've actually produced evidence that you feel that the moon is producing its own source of light.
Well, I think you're being a little more generous than you should be to me, because while I have gone at this and I have laid down, posited where I am with this, I don't think I can fairly claim that I have substantial evidence to the point where a scientific community would accept it. I have even taken prisms and looked at false light or man-made light or light bulbs, the sun and the moon. And what I found was, if you look through a prism and project it on a piece of white paper and you look at the spectrum that you get, it actually does look very close to the moon. What I did is I took the eyepiece out of my telescope, concentrated the moonlight through my scope, and shot it through the prism onto a piece of paper. And while they're very close, they're not identical.
Oh, okay.
Crrow, I wanted to ask you about some of the telescopes, such as the South Pole Telescope and the Lucifer Telescope. I mean, for example, the South Pole Telescope was built in one of the most inhospitable, environments on the planet. And why would they build a telescope there? And also the Lucifer Telescope, which was funded by the Vatican, and what the purpose you think is behind these two telescopes?
Kind of funny that they would name their telescope Lightbringer. It's collecting light out there. Well, there's something to see, isn't there? And I would mention this. There was a time, I don't know whether it was near the end of the 90s or maybe into the new millennium. I think it was in the 90s, if I remember back correctly, where all of astronomy, all of at once, and this is way back, so it must have been the 90s, when I was still trying to use my telescope to replicate what Hubble was doing and coming to the conclusion it couldn't be done. All of astronomy was moving away from optical telescopes. And when I say optical, I mean you put your eye up to it and you see what's going on with your eye. And they were going into X-ray and radio and all these other things. And I always thought it was so funny because it was such a big trend. And now what we see is all these people going back to optical, or filming with CCDs, or filming with digital equipment. And the short answer to what you pointed out is because there's absolutely something to see. But I would take it a step further for places like the Vatican. They're tracking the sky because the sky is the only true clock for this place we live called the world. The only true division of the time we have here is the solstices and the equinox. That's the only true division of the seasons. So if you basically break down what we're talking about, anyone who's tracking and looking at the sky is tracking time. Now, if we consider things like the transits of Venus across the sun, or other major events like some kind of an eclipse, which, by the way, I've challenged, saying that eclipses are not occurring in the way you've been told. But to get back to it, everyone's always paying careful attention to these big milestones in the sky. I would point out, it is quite likely that there are bloodlines or families or organizations who understand what the ages mean. And so when they're tracking the sky and the way they're tracking it, not only do they understand what happened before, but they understand what's supposed to come next in some way, shape, or form. And in some ways, that is controlling time to the deficit of the rest of us. And I mean, we could even take this further into daylight savings time, where they jack up our clock an hour for no good reason at the equinoxes, and so on and so forth.
All right, it's very interesting. So, I mean, I don't know if you looked into things like Planet X, Nibiru. What are your theories on that? Is that just some big hoax?
Yeah, I don't accept that stuff. Planet X has been on the way since before I was born. It's the planet that's on the way that never gets here. I don't accept the definition of planets. I surely don't accept Nibiru.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. I wanted to ask you also about how does you have talked about things like religion, and Freemasonry, and the Vatican even. Um, it seems like they're trying to hide something from us, hide knowledge or whatever you want to call it, for their own agenda to some extent. And the Vatican has obviously funded this massive telescope, the Lucifer telescope, for their own purposes. But I want to know what your take on was. How did they fit into all this, like the Vatican, Freemasonry?
Well, they're all related, of course. You can't separate the Vatican from royalty. You can't separate royalty from Freemasonry, or whether you want to call it the Elysian mysteries. All of the ancient mysteries, in my view, are cut from the same cloth. If you want to talk about the Elysian mysteries or the old bull mysteries that had to do with sacrificing bulls, it's all part and parcel of what Freemasonry is in the modern age, to some degree. Now, what they're doing, as far as I can tell, is they've got a bloodline of people who have been moving upward in ability. And when I say upward, I don't mean upright by any means, because what they're doing is downright wrong. It's dark, it's black, it's unfair. It doesn't seem to put much value on life except for the life they care about. But their abilities are going up, and you can start to demonstrate this. Like, very few people are aware there's a statue at the Vatican, which is a copper, I guess it's copper. It's a green pine cone. And the average person might say, why the hell is there a pine cone statue, this massive, I don't know what it is, 20-foot statue of a pine cone? Well, it's the pineal gland. It's even encoding the word pineal because the word pine is in it, and it's also an evergreen. From ancient times, the pine cone often encoded the pineal gland, which is also called the third eye. In every tradition you will ever experience in this world, higher human ability is dependent on a functional pineal gland. So it could quite possibly be that all this encoding and this construct system that we've all been brought up in is to retard the majority of us, while those lucky few elite who got the good information and were born into the right family are almost a bit of a different species at this point. They haven't been drinking fluoridated water, which calcifies your pineal gland. They haven't been eating boxed food from a grocery store, which is, well, everyone knows what that is. And so while they've been physically retarding with medicines, with any number of things, shots, inoculations, retarding the physical abilities of the lower classes of people, the common working man and woman, they have been ascending. And I don't know how well I described that.
Yeah, that's a very good description. Yeah, I mean, I think it all links together, everything with food and big pharma and the whole financial system. It's all used to control you to a certain extent, isn't it, really?
Yeah, of course. And I mean, the medical industry proves it flat out. Western medicine is not interested in curing anything. They treat symptoms, and they put foreign chemicals into your body to treat those symptoms, for the most part. I don't mean to generalize too hard here. But things like cancer, I'm here to tell you, if you ever see a world leader die of cancer, you're looking at fraud. Cancer has been cured using plant extracts and juices since at least the 30s, and probably way the hell before that. And that doesn't even touch the whole cannabis connection, where so many people today are curing themselves and their family members with cannabis extracts of one kind or another. My point would be, modern medicine really shows us that we're in a death-based system. It's quite possible that these elite families live much longer than we do. Even take something as common as a birthday. What do we do on a birthday? Well, we all get a cake, and they put a candle for each year we've been alive. They light each candle for each year we've been alive, and then we snuff them out. Well, we turn off the lights first, and then we snuff them out. Very few people are aware that supposedly the root to that tradition goes back to Greece, and it's mimicking the moon. That's why we turn out the lights before we blow out the candles. And as I said before, the moon is often associated with death. And so we have all these things built into our culture, which set the expectation in our minds that, hey man, in the Western world, I should die around 74 because I'm a man. My wife, she'd probably make it to 78. Those are the averages that we've all been kind of encoded with. We accept these as truths. Anyhow.
Okay. I'm just going to take some questions from the chat room. First question is Auguste Piccard and his findings of the space and Earth back in 1931. Do you have any comments about that? I don't know if you know anything.
Yeah, I actually do. It's interesting that he should have brought that, or he or she, I'm sorry, should have brought that up, because the same week that I announced that I thought it was likely space may be some sort of liquid, an engineer named Brian Mullen came to a similar conclusion within a 24-hour period of each other, I believe, independent of each other. He used science and math to do it. Hennessy was releasing these Piccard videos, and they were showing seemingly what looked like someone going up and breaking through the firmament and into water. So it's interesting they should comment in the way they did. And clearly there is a connection in all this. And clearly the Starfleet captain from Star Trek, Picard, is also named because of the man you're referencing. So obviously it's all intertwined.
All right, okay. The next question is, does Crow think of humanity as being denied knowledge or truth, that the concept of the fall of man is true then? So,
well, I could speculate on that, but I can tell you, maybe not to a certainty, but I am as damn close as I can get. You are witnessing the fall of man. We, all us common worker people who suffer by the parasites that run this world, because the elites are nothing more than ticks and mosquitoes. They contribute nothing of value to this world. They create constructs that hamper us all. They force us to get licenses for cars and do all these other nonsensical things when life is so short, and we sleep a third of it, we work a third of it, and then we got to deal with all this other crap these parasites pile on us with the last third of our life we have left. And I'm sorry, I kind of drifted. What was the initial question there, Taj?
to do with the fall of man. Now, does
Oh yeah.
yeah.
I got it. So you're basically witnessing de-evolution. A few generations ago, I would suggest we're a higher-minded civilization than we are now. You know, if you look at what's called the greatest generation, which for most of us would be grandparents or great-grandparents just prior to World War II, I would suggest to you that those were a higher-minded culture and civilization, and that even in this short time since World War II, we have been devolved and retarded to the point when we turn on a television and we see people defecating, urinating, throwing up, getting out of cars without underwear, you know, having sex in public. This is high comedy now for all of us. And I would suggest that in a higher-minded society, it's not possible that that would be even watchable.
Yeah.
So we basically are the fall of man right now.
Yeah, we're at the fall of man now. Have you looked into AI at all and how that fits into all of this?
Yeah, that's a heck of a thing, because it's constantly echoed in media and movies that the robots are going to take over. And clearly our technology has gone, you know.
I guess that sort of links into like the whole transhumanism thing, that people want to become these, you know, half human, half robots. They want to live forever, and they want to life extension technology and all this type of thing.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should bring up transhumanism, because that does relate to cybernetics, and that whole transhumanism idea relates directly to the Tavistock Institute. There are books published on it that people can read. If you go and look at the kind of social engineering, the worldwide social programming that has gone on from the rock and roll of the 60s, the hippie movement, all the way up through the drugged out adult generations, that was all brought to us by Tavistock, and transhumanism is a part of that plan.
Yeah. I've looked into transhumanism quite a bit, especially things like Agenda 2045, and certain scientists, you know, experimenting right now, and even things like age regression. You know, I think I saw an article about a woman who's actually using some kind of gene therapy to age regress herself. It's all, I think it's all linked together.
Well, it's crazy. If you start to think about chips being put in the human body, I mean, at what point do your thoughts cease to be yours, you know? And then there's an ultimate level of control.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't know if you looked into things linked with the paranormal at all, with the entities and that type of thing. That's also sort of linked to transhumanism in a way. I mean, have you looked into any type of paranormal sort of thing? How that links up with things like the Vatican and the whole even Freemasons could be linked to that as well.
You know, nothing would surprise me at this point. I don't close my mind to any of it, but I try to force myself to remain in kind of the most level-headed space I can. And the simple reason for that is because some of the things that I am saying are going to be so outlandish to people who are unfamiliar that it doesn't really help if I was to say go off and, you know, do some research on ghosts or some other thing. So what I try to do is be as level-headed and straightforward as I can to point out the deducible fallacies about this place we live that, and I just don't really veer left or right too much.
Okay, well, got a question here about chemtrails. What is the purpose of the chemtrails? I sort of know the answer to this, but I mean, it's basically to, you know, poison us, I guess, in a way, isn't it? But are there any other sort of theories behind, or what conclusions have you come to about chemtrails?
Well, I would suggest if it is some kind of a poisoning, it's not meant to kill us. It's just retarding us further. If they wanted to knock everybody off, then, you know, why are they taking so long to do it? But the things we know about chemtrails is lab reports from all over the world have demonstrated that there are 3 common heavy metals, and I hope I don't get this wrong. It's some form of aluminum, barium, and strontium, I believe, and all those
Yeah.
are bad for us. But we can demonstrate that there are massive amounts of sunlight being blocked. We can demonstrate that sunset and sunrise are being blocked many places. I drove across this country twice recently, and I don't think I ever saw a clean shot of a sunrise or a sunset while I was on the road. I would estimate where I live now, maybe 1 in 30 days when I get a decent clear shot of a sunset. So there's something going on there. Other than that, I think we can tie it pretty even-handedly to weather manipulation, and I would suggest to anyone listening that it is quite possible that weather is no longer predicted, it is scheduled.
Right, so that sort of links to the whole, I don't know what you think about the global warming, you know, agenda.
Global warming's a fraud, in my view. I live in a place now where I'm within a walk of a beach that I've known since I was, I think, 4 years old, maybe even a little earlier than that. The beach has a chain link fence at the top where a person's property is. You know, in my lifetime, there have been a couple high tides high enough, maybe more than a couple, where it hits the fence. And that's if there's a full moon and all the conditions are just right, the wind's blowing the right way. And what it does is it puts seaweed up in that fence. And then the seaweed dries like leather. And it's there for sometimes years, telling you that a couple years ago, the water level actually made it to that fence. I'm here to tell you that as far as I can tell, the water level has not hit that fence in, I don't know, 20 years or something, 15 years. And I cannot detect a noticeable rise in high tide at all. And we're talking 40, 50 feet of beach here. You know, it's not a massive beach like on the West Coast where I was. So in my view, I think that's demonstrable that global warming is a fraud. And the reason I say that is because they're constantly threatening that all these seaside cities are going to be going under, and they're already doing global warming shenanigans here where they're coming in to fix all these marshes and other things because the water level's rising. The only problem is the water level has not risen.
So what was the purpose then of the global warming agenda? Why make up something like that? That is, you know.
Well, it generated a lot of money, and I would not be surprised if someday when they can't get away with chemtrailing because enough people finally wake up and look up above their head and understand what they're seeing is not normal or natural, that they're going to say that chemtrailing was put into action because it was pretty clear the planet was going to catch on fire because of global warming or some nonsense like that. I would not be surprised one bit if global warming ended up being the cover story for what they're doing with chemtrails.
Right, okay. Another question we have is, do you have any personal religious beliefs in some kind of divine power or God or source or whatever you want to call it?
I do. I have serious religious beliefs. I've studied many major religions all around the world, and they are personal. I don't talk about them in public.
All right, okay. The next question, not sure if you want to answer either. Then, what do you think happens after death?
I think it's quite likely, after having lived a life of coercion in the system that we live in currently, that when we die, we are energy, and energy cannot be destroyed, which pretty much means to me that we go on. It's a bit like when I used to say the only way we could leave this world is without our body. I think you're coerced further. I can't say much more than that, and I don't want to say much more than that, because people always bring up things like going into the light. I have made up my mind about whether or not to go into the light and what that means, but my problem is this. I'm doing the best I can, and I don't want to say things that are going to sway people unless I'm 100% sure, and I'm not 100% sure.
Right. I have this theory that basically, as we're here on Earth, we're living in this 3D dimension, and we can't actually leave here. Like you were saying, we can't leave the planet Earth and go into space, the moon, wherever, because our physicality, our bodies can't, exist in space or on the moon or on other planets, and that we are linked to the Earth in some way, like our frequency. We have to stay here, kind of thing. If we left here, we would die. Because we are connected some way energetically to this planet. What do you think about that theory?
Well, I can say this, the idea of death again proves how retarded we are as a society in the West. There are cultures like Tibet, for example, that spent, I don't know, 1,000 years or better, maybe more like 1,500 years, studying death, what happened at death, how a human being could go into death in meditation, all these other things. And they're not alone in this, because what they ended up knowing was inherited from India. And wherever it came from before India, who knows, or Hinduism, some of these very ancient things that we assume are probably ancient. My point is this: in the West, we keep death as far away as we can keep it. The average American has probably never even seen a dead body unless they've been to a wake or a funeral or something, because it is so sanitized. If someone dies in this country, you pull a blanket over them, you call the people who are going to come collect the body, they come do whatever it is they do to dead bodies, and then you're handed a jar with ashes in it, or you show up at a gravesite when a box goes in the ground. And this is all bass-ackwards. We all have to go through this door. How is it that we have not spent equal time to Tibet or India or Hindu cultures or any number of cultures who actually studied death? And the reason I bring this up is because you and I are talking about death probably in a way that sounds like people wearing diapers to people from those other cultures.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe in that there are other dimensions existing, where we exist here right now, that there are beings or whatever you want to call them, who live in these higher dimensions?
I can speculate, but there has to be more than this, doesn't there? Almost seems like this is boot camp sometimes.
Yeah, I guess it does. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people believe that like Sarah was saying before, she does a lot sort of like astral travel, and she believes like your soul or your astral body can leave and travel, wherever in other dimensions, basically.
Well, I can tell you this: if I could astral travel, which, as far as I know, I cannot. I've never tried, so maybe I could. I just don't know it. I wouldn't need a telescope.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, we've got another question here regarding Antarctica. What do you think is really happening in Antarctica? There's a lot of theories about flat Earth and such, and there's a massive ice wall, etc., etc. But what do you think is really happening in Antarctica?
Antarctica is going to be key in kind of deciphering what this place is until some trustworthy private source is actually able to go to 70,000 feet or whatever it would require and fly wherever the heck they want, which nobody can do unless you're, a major airline or military or something. I don't accept that there's a South Pole in the way that it's been described. And even if we were to take bits and pieces of what Admiral Byrd left us, and I'm not suggesting he ever told us the truth because he was an admiral, so we kind of already know who that man was. And one of the claims he made was that when he had gone in as far as he could go, there was more land left than the United States, claiming there's another 3,000 miles going on there.
Yeah.
I would suggest to everyone listening, you have no idea what any landmass in this world looks like, first of all, and I can prove that part. But you also don't know how much land is here. And if you understand that one of the most valuable things above gold is land, then you could start to reason together how it might be that the people who had all the power, all the ships, all the money, all the everything may have hidden complete land masses from us. But to get back to proving to everyone that you don't even know the shape of the United States, you all grew up, most of us grew up, in high schools that had Mercator projection maps on the wall. A Mercator projection map, we are told, had nice straight lines so that the maritime or sea navigators could have nice straight lines to navigate with.
Mm-hmm.
What very few people understand about the Mercator projection is it grossly warps the size of a landmass. And one of the side effects of this, which was almost certainly intentionally implemented, was that the tiny ruling class nations in Europe are made to look bigger than they are, and the third world nations like South America are made to look smaller than they are.
Yeah.
Now, when you think about this, can you imagine taking a Mercator projection map and shrinking down those tiny countries and actually expanding South America a little more? But to make my point here, there are many other projections. There's a Peters projection. There's a Gall-Peters projection. You can look up all the map projections. Go pick 2 or 3 of them, put them next to each other on your computer monitor, and you will notice one thing very quickly. None of them match. So that can only mean one thing. None of them are correct. And if none of them are correct, what that means is none of us have really a good idea of the shape of any landmass, and that totally sets aside the idea that we may not understand even how much land is in this world.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I've seen maps that are like hundreds of years old, but they seem to show land masses which they didn't even know about, such as Australia.
Right.
Australia, are shown on this map, and you figure like, well, if they knew about Australia 400 or 500 years ago, how come they only discovered it 200 years ago? It doesn't make any sense, does it?
No,
really?
it doesn't. And this is the problem with history, because it really is his story. It's someone's version of what they wanted to say about it. But I recently saw what was claimed to be a very old Buddhist map showing 33 continents outside of the ones we're familiar with.
I've seen that map as well, yeah.
So who knows? But my point would be, is if you can understand absolutely that you don't even understand the shape of any continent or the size of any continent, then you damn well should be able to consider, hey man, there may be a lot more land here than we're even aware of. And I think Antarctica is a prime example of this. How is it that 57 nations, or I'm guessing, however many nations are guarding the border? You can't go there without permission. The only people you do see go there are princes and famous people. Every name of every object in that place is either after some military dude or a royal prince or a king. Yeah, man, you can logically deduce that that's a keystone of some sort.
Okay, we have another question from the chat room. Crow, can you elaborate on the Hatipov information relating to a plasma conduit going from Saturn to the moon using as a type of quantum computer to dilate time and manipulate human consciousness as a land management system?
Let me apologize in advance, because I don't think you're going to like my answer, so I do apologize.
Okay.
Early on, I got into Hatipov because I thought it might be the only real description of a possible lunar wave. After many translations by Russian speakers, we had a consensus. The majority of them thought he was probably describing the lunar wave. There were 2 or 3 who did not agree with that. Having said this, as we began to get into the idea of aliens that look like spiders and all these other things, I began to question how helpful the Hatipov material was. And so I set out to do one single thing, and that was to prove he was a real man. And we couldn't do it. We could not prove Hatipov was absolutely a real person. Right. And that's when I kind of put the information at arm's length. And I will preface that by saying there were a lot of people on my channel acting like they were going to start the Church of the Spider, which is how all that started.
Right. Okay. So you haven't found any evidence that he really existed from all the
Not,
information that he published
no,
in Russian?
not for certain, and it's worse than that. You know, when we started to realize what we were reading and just how amazing it was, you know, it'd make the best sci-fi novel of all time. I don't know why someone hasn't grabbed the Hattie Bob stuff and written a new sci-fi novel. We went out and searched for everything we could, and I even got Russian speakers sending me stuff. So we had all these PDFs, and then we realized we didn't get everything, and we were going back to try to find things, and stuff was gone. And then it was just this weird thing. As soon as Hattie Bob came out on my channel, people started, I guess, searching the name, going into Russian websites, and just weirdness ensued. Stuff that we knew was posted was missing. People who really revered Hattie Bob started to ask questions like, who are you people? And are you, it became a very strange thing. But at the end of the day, no, I could not absolutely prove that he was a real man. But you've got to understand, I don't speak Russian. And one of the languages that does not translate well in an online tool is Russian.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And next question.
Oh, let me interrupt. I should tell the individual, if you're still interested in Hattie Bow, my friend James Alfred runs the Sage Sigma blog, and he has the best English translations of the majority of the stuff we took an interest in. So there's that.
Okay, yeah, if you send me the links for that, I can post it in the description of the video when I post it in a couple of days.
Okay, Sage Sigma blog, yep.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's Sage Sigma Unbound. There you go.
Sage Sigma Unbound, okay. The next question, I don't know if you want to get into this, about past lives. Indigo children.
Sure.
Do you want to, how do I put this question? Was it Dolores Cannon? Does he believe in past lives, and has he heard of Dolores Cannon and the free waves of awakened ones and indigo children? Do you want to answer that or not?
There is a strange kind of, how do I put this? There's a strange thing that goes on in our lifetimes where we gravitate towards certain people. And a lot of us can maybe have had a version of this happen where they'll be in a place that's far from their local city, and they've just gone there, and they'll bump into a person who they were one time close to. Out of all these thousands of people around, there's like this gravity that pulls people together. Yeah. And I think this does have a relationship to the history of us all. And I do think there is probably a one mind of sort that feeds into this. I have not heard of the person or author you mentioned, but for indigo children, back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was this idea floating about that there were these indigo children, that they were very rare, and that governments were trying to hide them and all this stuff. But I would point out, I have nephews now that are in their 20s, and these children, all of them are indigo children in a way, maybe not in the way where it's, you know, you hear all these amazing things, but they have abilities that their parents never would have. In other words, you can see the abilities increasing in this younger generation. And when I say younger generation, people born post 1994 or so, many of these children are going to be able to do things that their parents never could, just simply because, I guess, they're born with the ability, or an awakening, whatever you want to call it. For some reason, they have these talents where their parents could have worked a lifetime to try to match them, and they just can't. That's how I view indigo children, not maybe in the same way as someone who could levitate things, or these other claims that are made that I can't officiate in any way.
Mm-hmm. I think some people believe the indigo children are here for a purpose or a reason of some kind, that they've incarnated here for some reason at this time.
Well, I don't think there's any mistakes in this place. You know, this place is pretty well engineered, isn't it? You know, the birds show up in the summer, and they do what they do. They take off in the winter. Every microscopic organism is doing what it does. I mean, this place is pretty well engineered. So I would submit that the majority of the things that go on here are probably doing something for a reason.
Yeah, also doesn't really make any sense either when you think the elite are trying to dumb us down and all this kind of thing, that children are being born with abilities such as this. So there must be some kind of, I don't really want to say like divine purpose to their incarnating here now at this time when probably humanity probably needs them the most. But
Well, it's a funny thing. Even if we look at things we can observe, like if you took a blue food coloring glass of water and poured it into a pool, what you would see is the blue, intense blue where you poured it would slowly, spread itself out till it was equal all over the pool. You're looking at a high concentration, flowing from high to low until it finds equilibrium. So maybe the people who have grabbed all this power and are doing all these kind of unjustifiable things are finding that nature isn't prepared to let them get away with it. Who knows?
Yeah, that could be true. Yeah. Yep.
I think that's why it's the children that are targeted with vaccines and all the rest of it, isn't it? They have
Right.
the worst food is made for children, like sweets, high sugar, and all the rest of it, and vaccines and all the rest of it.
Well,
Just a thought.
what do we feed our kids? Formula. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
You're feeding a kid a formula, and when he's not getting formula, you're giving him milk from a damn cow. I would submit that people should drink people milk, and cows should drink cow milk. And I don't know what the hell's in formula, but just the name of it alone lets me know I'll never pour it into a baby.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think children are sort of attacked even before they're born now with vaccines and, all kinds of things. So, children being born with Alzheimer's and all kinds of things, which, they're saying it's not linked to vaccines, but it's pretty obvious that it is.
Well,
Big pharma don't want you to know that, obviously.
They know what they're doing. How long ago was it that baby bottles still had BPH in them? You don't think people knew that? I mean, look at how our products come to us now. They come from China. It's almost like sidestepping, because like in the United States, there's supposed to be all these organizations that protect you from these products that could be bad. And if they're ever caught where there's a serious problem, there's something supposed to be done about it. Well, now the whole table's been flipped upside down. Now anything comes out of China. It comes in these big storage tanker, semi-sized boxes, millions of them. And Lord only knows what they're shipping. Nobody knows. Nobody's checking it all. So, yeah, man, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think with a lot of food as well, even you can't even go to a shop and buy organic food because you don't even know if it's organic. Who's going to police? Who's going to police that and say you're buying organic?
Yeah,
food,
you can kind of tell in a way with some foods, like bananas will last a lot longer and they won't brown out in the same way. But to back up what you just said, go when you have time, look up the definition for what it means to be organic, and you're going to walk away disappointed.
Okay, the next question is, what do you think the purpose of CERN is?
That's a tough one. I've heard some pretty savant people talk about it and say some very interesting things. I can only speculate, but what I think I can say safely is it's not doing what they say it's doing. And then when you start to realize the Shiva statue and all the other kind of occult nonsense that's encoded in all this stuff, that they act like there's nothing to it, I think we can safely deduce that it's in Switzerland, so it's important. But I would also add, I'd like to lay my eyes on it because the only thing I've ever seen is in Google Earth and a website. I assume it's there, but I've gotten so kind of jaded that unless I lay my eyes on it, there will always be a kind of grain of doubt in my mind. That's how bad it's gotten. But to get back to it, I don't believe for a second they're bouncing particles off anything. And I had one guy that I interviewed talk about the idea that it was inventing new colors, and it was a very interesting idea.
Yeah, I've heard the theories about they're trying to create black holes and portals and all this type of thing. I did look into it a while ago, and the way it's constructed, it's not designed to what they're saying it's designed to do, which is find the Higgs boson particle and stuff like that. It's designed completely wrong for its purpose, basically.
Well, if you want to see one of the major frauds of the modern age, Go look up the Nova show where they're supposedly going to announce and confirm they found the God particle, the Higgs boson. It is the most rank piece of propaganda you will ever see. And one of the funniest things about the episode, besides the fact that Higgs is sitting in the room when the guy looks up and looks at the audience and says, "So what do you think, guys? Can we say we discovered it?" And everyone goes, "Yeah." And it's like, oh my God, they won't allow Higgs to get up and speak. But during the course of the show, they get all these people to get an interview. Are we going to find the Higgs boson? Oh yeah, it's going to be between this and this. And they do it with like 12 people. And then one guy walks up and they go, "Are we going to find the Higgs boson?" And he looks at the camera and says, "Nope, because it doesn't exist."
Michael, we've got a few minutes left, and I just want to do one more question. What do you think is going to happen this year to humanity in general, as far as the collapse of the economy? Is it going to go bad? Do you see a positive outcome this year or a negative outcome?
This is the thing. The majority of this world that we live in is an opt-in situation. Donald Trump is a good example of this. It didn't make a damn bit of difference whether Trump or Hillary got in. The game would have still been played. They were put there. You had nothing to do with the choosing of them. Elections do not seat presidents. The Electoral College seats presidents. And again, we have a president seated who did not get the popular vote, but the Electoral College sat them anyhow. My point is this. When they put a clown show like this in front of you, you can be tied up in it and mad and upset and embarrassed that such a clown is representing your country. You can do all these things, or you can act like your own human being. And you can act like a person who's not ready to accept a clown or nonsense or any number of things we can look at in this world. If enough people grab their adult higher mind, then maybe we can have a better outcome this year. But I can assure you, you're not going to see a let up. The chemtrails are going to be flying every day as they always are. The false flag events, the Sandy hoaxes, the 9/11s, they're going to probably come just as fast and furious as they did in 2016. My point is this. When enough people understand it's nonsense, then the power begins to diminish by the people that are doing this. So I think the real question here is, what are we going to do about the outcome of 2017 to make it better?
Okay, do you want to give out your information where people can contact you, your YouTube channel? I know you have a website as well.
Yeah, my YouTube channel is Crrow777, and that's CRROW 777. There's 2 R's in the word Crow. And I have a podcast website that hosts 2-hour shows, and that is Crrow777radio.com.
Okay, and are you working on anything new at the moment?
I'm getting ready to do another podcast. I just did, I think, over 12 hours, 6 shows with Jason Lindgren of Secrets of Saturn, debunking space, debunking the moon landings, Virgin Galactic, SpaceX, any number of space-related nonsense things that we live with in our lives. But I think this next one, I'm actually going to go back into a false flag event, maybe the Boston bombing, but not in the way people are expecting. Everyone knows that was a hoax. Everyone knows many of the reasons why. I'm going to go at it at a different angle because that was a direct attack on the freedom of a country. That was the day when people bought into sacrificing their freedom for security.
Okay, thank you, Crow, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Crow.
Thanks, Nyssa.
Thank you.
And I can hear the music coming in now, so good night, everyone. And just to let you know that next week we'll have on Jordan Maxwell. So we'll see you next week with Jordan Maxwell. Thank you and good night.